The husk staggered through the void, engines burning unevenly, hull patched with scars that no engineer would have ever allowed to leave a dockyard. What little paint had once marked her designation had long since burned away. She was a survivor, but barely. Her crew felt the same. Inside, silence ruled, not the silence of deep space, but the silence of exhaustion. Every man and woman aboard had been hollowed out by the ruins, by the machines, by the sight of comrades torn apart, and a civilization's last secrets consumed in fire. The ship lived only because human hands refused to let it die. Commander Elias Rourke moved through the corridors, one hand brushing the metal bulkheads as though reassuring himself that they still held. His boots echoed in the dim light. Faces turned toward him as he passed, eyes bloodshot, cheeks hollow, skin stained by smoke and grease. Some saluted weakly, others simply stared. Rourke returned nothing but a nod. He understood. They were alive, and that was all that mattered. On the bridge, Lieutenant Mara Vase sat at her console, shoulders hunched. The displays before her scrolled with meaningless static. She no longer trusted the readings. Ever since the cocoon had fallen and the ruins had gone dark, her instruments had felt like lies. She alone knew that the silence was not true silence. Beyond the ruins, something had listened, something vast. She had not told Rourke, not yet. Her secret felt heavier than the ship itself. Chief Engineer Kaito Ren was on his knees beside the primary reactor conduit when Rourke found him. His hands were burned, wrapped in blackened bandages, but he kept working. Sparks spat across his face. "You're going to kill yourself," Rourke said. Ren barked a laugh without looking up. "Not before I kill this ship first. You want her alive? Then shut up and let me do this." Rourke crouched beside him, silent. For a long time, only the hiss of welding filled the space. Then Ren muttered, almost to himself, "I keep thinking about Strauss. She wanted to understand them, and now she's dead. Was it worth it?" Rourke's voice was quiet. "It wasn't about worth. It was about survival." Ren spat, a glob of blood in it. "Then we're fools. Because we're still alive, but they're still out there. Whatever built those things, whatever's listening." Rourke did not answer. He stood and left, his silence the only answer he had. The journey home took weeks. No relay stations existed this far out, no convenient ports to resupply. The husk limped from star to star, skimming fuel from icy comets, patching hull with whatever debris they could capture. The crew fell into a rhythm of survival. In the mess, Marines spoke little. They cleaned their weapons even though there was nothing left to fight. Their armor sat patched with alien alloy, trophies of a battle they did not believe they had won. Corporal Han, his arms still in a sling, stared at his food without eating. When Rourke sat across from him, the Marine lifted his eyes only once. "Sir, we lost half the squad. I don't even know what to tell their families." "Tell them their sons and daughters stood where no one else could," Rourke said. Han's eyes filled with something between grief and rage. "That's not enough." "No," Rourke agreed. "It never is." When the husk finally crossed the frontier into mapped human space, a relay station received her signal. The response was shock. No ship had returned from beyond the rim in decades, and most missions never came back at all. To see a vessel so broken, carrying survivors with hollow eyes, was a ghost story made real. They docked at an outpost barely large enough to hold them. Medical teams boarded immediately, trying to drag crew away for treatment. Most refused. They did not want strangers touching them. Rourke was summoned to a sterile briefing chamber, its walls bright white after weeks of dim red emergency lights. A projection of the High Command Council shimmered across the room, dozens of faces staring at him from the safety of Earth and its colonies. "You claim you encountered non-human technology," one counselor said sharply. "Provide evidence." Rourke placed an alloy shard on the table. It gleamed faintly, humming with energy despite the damage. "This is your evidence." The counselors muttered among themselves. One leaned forward. "We have encountered alien artifacts before. Fragments, anomalies, none of it proven intelligent." "How do you expect us to believe that you fought an entire mechanical swarm?" Rourke's jaw clenched. "Because half my crew is dead. Because I watched men and women torn apart by machines that moved like predators, because we destroyed their command core and survived. Convenient, another counselor said. The only proof of these so-called machines lies in your testimony. And you bring us shards, not bodies. Rourke leaned forward, his voice a low growl. We didn't have the luxury of bringing trophies. We were too busy staying alive. The chamber went silent. The counselors shifted uncomfortably but did not apologize. At last one said, "We will study your materials. In the meantime, your crew is to be debriefed and the husk impounded for inspection. You will remain at the outpost until further notice." Rourke knew an order when he heard one. He saluted stiffly. "Yes, Council." The projection vanished, leaving him alone in the sterile light. Word of the husk spread quickly through the outpost. Some whispered that the crew had gone mad beyond the rim, inventing monsters to excuse their losses. Others whispered that it was all true, that humanity had finally touched the edge of something vast and terrible. Fear spread faster than truth. In the medical bay, Vey lay on a cot, staring at the ceiling. A young physician tried to scan her, but she pushed the device away. "You're not sick," the physician said gently. "You're exhausted. Let us help." Vey's voice was hollow. "You can't help. None of you can." She turned her face to the wall, hiding her secret. The signal still echoed in her mind, faint but insistent. It had not stopped since they left the ruins. It was following them. Ren, meanwhile, found himself surrounded by engineers eager to strip the husk apart. They questioned his modifications, his use of alien alloy, his splicing of systems. He met every question with a snarl. "You want to know how she's still flying?" he barked. "Because I broke every rule you worship. If you had been out there, you'd all be dead already. Don't you dare tell me how to build when you've never seen a ship blade." His words silenced them, but only for a time. The whispers of unstable, dangerous, reckless followed him through the corridors. Ren welcomed them. If they thought him mad, they would not see how much fear he carried. Rourke requested permission to address his crew one final time before they were scattered into debriefings and interrogations. The council reluctantly allowed it. He gathered them in the outpost's hangar, faces pale, uniforms stained, eyes sunken, survivors of something no one else would believe. "You'll be told that what we saw isn't real," Rourke said, his voice carried like iron. "You'll be told it was exhaustion or madness or fabrication. They will try to make you doubt yourselves. Do not let them. We know the truth. We saw the machines. We fought them. We killed them. And if they ever come here, humanity will not be ready unless we tell the truth." The crew stood in silence. No cheers, no shouts, only the quiet determination of people who had already lost too much. Afterward, Han approached him. "Sir, what if they don't listen? What if they bury it?" Rourke placed a hand on his shoulder. "Then we carry it ourselves, until the day they have no choice but to believe." That night, Vey could not sleep. The signal in her head pulsed stronger than ever. She sat at her console, rerouting the outpost's comm relays into hidden channels. What she saw made her blood run cold. The signal was no longer faint. It was a beacon, spreading across the void, growing stronger as though feeding on its own echoes. It was not only listening, it was calling. Vey's hands shook. She whispered into the empty room, "It knows where we are." The screen flared with alien symbols. For the first time, she thought she understood them. Not words, not language, an intent. The intent was hunger. The outpost that had seemed vast to the crew of the husk was no more than a speck compared to the wheels of bureaucracy grinding on Earth and its colonies. Rourke knew it would be only a matter of time before High Command dragged him into another sterile chamber, but he did not expect the summons to come so quickly. The message arrived while he stood in the mess, drinking tepid water that tasted of recycled metal. The order was simple: report to Strategic Council for reassignment. The wording was cold, impersonal, the kind of language used when the decision was already made. Rourke read it twice, then folded the slate in half until the screen cracked. The crew around him looked up but said nothing. They already knew their fates were no longer their own. Earth was distant, but the Council's reach was long. They sent a carrier, fresh and gleaming, to ferry the survivors. As the husk was dragged into dry dock, Her crew boarded the pristine vessel with the air of ghosts entering a cathedral. The contrast between the battered survivor and the unscarred newcomer made whispers ripple through the hangars. On the flight, officers of the carrier eyed Rourke's people with thinly veiled contempt. To them, the crew of the Husk were half-mad relics, dangerous and unstable. Rumors had already spread that they had fabricated their tale to hide incompetence. Rourke ignored the stares. He sat in silence, eyes fixed on the bulkhead, mind turning over the same truth. He did not care if they believed him. He cared only that humanity was unprepared. They sat beside him, arms crossed tightly. She had not slept in days. Every time she closed her eyes, the signal returned brighter, sharper. She wanted to tell him, but fear froze her tongue. If the council already doubted them, what would they do if she claimed to hear voices in the dark? Ren sat across the aisle, surrounded by his makeshift tools and alloy fragments. He guarded them as if they were children. When an officer reached too close, he snapped his teeth like a wolf. The Marines clustered together, silent and grim. Their faces had hardened into masks of suspicion. They no longer trusted uniforms that shone too brightly. The council chamber was not sterile white this time. It was vast and gilded, walls lined with banners of Earth and its colonies. The contrast was deliberate, meant to impress upon visitors the weight of human civilization. To Rourke, it felt hollow. The councillors sat in a half-circle, elevated above the floor. Behind them hovered projections of ships and colonies, each annotated with fleet movements and supply chains. The machinery of empire at work. Commander Rourke, the central figure said, voice measured. Your testimony has been reviewed, your evidence examined. While inconclusive, it cannot be dismissed outright. The phrasing made Rourke's stomach twist. They did not believe, but they feared enough to pretend. Therefore, the counselor continued, you are reassigned to lead a frontier task force. You will investigate unexplained disappearances along the rim. You will determine whether these events are natural, hostile, or, as you claim, alien. The words landed like chains. This was not vindication, it was containment. If he failed, they could dismiss him as a zealot. If he succeeded, they could control the narrative. Rourke stood stiffly. What resources am I given? A gesture. A projection shimmered into being beside the counselor, 3 ships. A heavy cruiser, the Ironhold, a frigate, the Veil, and the Husk, patched but alive. Rourke's breath caught. You're sending her back out. She survived the impossible, the counselor said. That makes her valuable. If her crew can keep her flying, she will serve. Alongside her, you will command the cruiser under Captain Rainsford and the frigate under Lieutenant Commander Delacroix. Names to remember, allies or obstacles. You will also take on fresh recruits, the counselor added. We require new perspectives untainted by your trauma. The insult was deliberate. Rourke did not flinch. Understood. Do not fail us, the counselor said. Rourke saluted, turned, and left without a word. Captain Rainsford was a man of polished steel. His uniform immaculate, his hair silver, his eyes sharp with suspicion. He met Rourke in the briefing hall, posture rigid. You're the ghost who brought back madness from the rim, Rainsford said without introduction. Rourke met his gaze evenly. And you're the man who's never seen the void bleed. For a moment, silence. Then Rainsford smiled thinly. This will be interesting. Lieutenant Commander Delacroix was younger, ambitious, his eyes bright with calculation. He shook Rourke's hand firmly. I've read your reports. If half of it is true, we're on the edge of something extraordinary. If it's not, then history will remember who wasted our time. Rourke said nothing. He did not need their belief. He needed their ships. The Husk's crew returned to their ship with mixed feelings. To step aboard her scarred decks was to step back into the nightmare, but also into the only place they still belonged. Ren kissed the bulkhead as he entered. Still here, you stubborn bastard, he muttered. His engineers glared, but he ignored them. Vey returned to her console, hands trembling. The signal was waiting, pulsing faintly beneath the static. She whispered to herself, it knows. The Marines cleaned their weapons. Han looked around at the familiar walls and said quietly, better the devil we know. Rourke gathered them all in the hangar. We are not alone anymore. 2 other ships sail with us. Their crews will not trust us. They will think us liars, madmen, relics. Let them. Our duty is not to convince them. Our duty is to survive and to be ready for what comes." The crew nodded. No cheers, no fire, only the grim resolve of the scarred. The task force departed within days. Their course aimed at the frontier colonies where disappearances had multiplied. Merchant ships lost without distress calls. Mining stations silent. Patrols returning empty. The Ironhold sailed at the center, hull gleaming, weapons bristling. The Veil flanked her, fast and sharp. The Husk limped behind, scarred and mismatched. To the eye, it seemed she did not belong. To those aboard, she was the only one that did. Their first stop was the colony of Orcel, a barren rock mined for its rare metals. The settlement should have held 5,000 workers. Instead, when they arrived, the colony was silent. Rainsford ordered a cautious approach. No signals, no life signs, no heat. Rourke stood on the bridge of the Husk, watching the lifeless domes below. "It's not silence," he said quietly. "It's absence." Wren studied the scans. The power cores are intact. Systems show no overload. It's like they just stopped. Vey's hands shook at her console. She whispered, "Not stopped, taken." Her words went unnoticed. Boarding teams deployed. Marines from the Ironhold and Vale entered the colony. They found tools lying where they had been dropped, meals half-eaten, beds still warm, but no bodies, not one. The reports spread unease through the task force. On the Ironhold, Rainsford insisted it was a mass evacuation. On the Vale, Delacroix theorized it was piracy. On the Husk, the survivors shared silent looks. They knew better. Rourke walked through the empty streets, his boots echoing. He saw children's toys scattered in the dust, a doll's head broken, a ball rolling gently in the stale air. He felt the weight of absence more than the presence of death. Han muttered behind him, "This feels like the ruins all over again." Rourke said nothing. That night, as the task force regrouped, Vey intercepted the signal again. Stronger now, pulsing through the void, threading itself through every star. She stared at the patterns until her eyes burned. She realized with horror that it was not just a beacon. It was a net, and humanity had already stepped into it. The colony of Orcel had been left behind like a half-remembered nightmare, but it traveled with the task force. The emptiness of its streets, the absence of its people, haunted every crew. The official reports filed by Captain Rainsford described unexplained evacuation. Lieutenant Commander Delacroix's report listed possible large-scale piracy. The Husk's report said nothing at all. Rourke knew no words would change minds that had already chosen comfort over fear. Still, he could not shake the look in his Marines' eyes as they had walked past abandoned meals and half-built machinery. It was not death that frightened them. It was the silence of lives stolen whole. Now the task force sailed deeper along the rim, their course set for a region where survey probes had gone missing decades earlier. The void grew darker the farther they traveled. On the Husk, Wren worked with unrelenting fury, scavenging every bolt and circuit he could pry loose. "If something comes for us," he muttered, "I don't want to be holding a wrench and a prayer." His engineers whispered that he was breaking more than he fixed. He ignored them. Vey spent her nights at her console, eyes ringed with shadows. The signal filled her skull until she could barely think. She saw its patterns in her dreams, heard its rhythm in her pulse. Sometimes she thought it was speaking to her. Sometimes she feared it already had. Rourke saw all of this and said nothing. He had no comfort left to give. The Ironhold's wardroom glittered with polished steel and glass. Rainsford had summoned the senior officers of the task force for strategy review. "We have a mandate," he said sharply. "Investigate disappearances, restore confidence in the rim, nothing more, nothing less. We are not here to indulge superstition." His eyes fixed on Rourke. "I'm not interested in superstition," Rourke replied. His voice was quiet, but the words carried. "I'm interested in survival. We've already seen colonies stripped bare. Pretend it's piracy if it makes you feel better, but you know as well as I do there were no bodies, no signs of resistance. Something took them whole." Delacroix leaned forward, curiosity flickering in his eyes. If he's right, then what we're looking at isn't piracy, it's harvest. The word fell heavy across the room. Rainsford scowled. Speculation, we deal in facts, and the facts are that we are still alive and we are still searching. That is all. Rourke held his gaze for a long moment, then said nothing. He had learned that sometimes silence was more dangerous than words. 3 days later, the task force found the graveyard. At first, it appeared as a scattering of shadows on long-range scans, fragments orbiting a cold star. But as they closed the distance, the scope of it became clear. An entire fleet of vessels hung dead in the void, larger than anything humanity had ever built. Their shapes were alien, curved and jagged, their hulls scarred with wounds older than any human civilization. Some ships were split in half, others punctured with holes that looked melted from the inside. "God in heaven," Wren whispered when the image filled the husk's bridge. "This is no ruin. This is a battlefield." The Ironhold broadcast orders. Rainsford's voice was crisp. "Frigates and shuttles will sweep the perimeter. Cruiser will remain on station. All ships will maintain close formation. No exceptions." Rourke studied the graveyard, unease crawling down his spine. He had seen ruins before. He had seen machines still hungry after centuries. Something about this felt different, not abandoned, waiting. Boarding teams from the Vale approached the largest derelict, a vessel so vast it dwarfed their frigate. Its hull bore scars like claw marks. As they cut their way in, their comms transmitted silence, broken only by their own breathing. The corridors were black glass, twisted and frozen. Strange symbols glowed faintly on the walls, pulsing as if in response to their presence. Delacroix's voice came through the task force channel. "We are detecting power signatures, minimal but active. This ship is not entirely dead." Rainsford snapped back. "Withdraw immediately. That is an order." But Delacroix hesitated. "Commander Rourke, you've seen this before. What's your assessment?" The bridge of the husk went silent. Vey looked up from her console, eyes wide. Wren gripped the railing until his knuckles bled. Rourke closed his eyes. "If it's alive, it's dangerous. Get your people out." Delacroix's answer came strained. "They've found something. A chamber, gods, it's full of—" The transmission cut off. Alarms blared across the task force. The Vale's boarding shuttles vanished from sensors one by one, not destroyed, but swallowed by interference. Then the derelict moved. Not much, a shudder, a slow turning, but enough to send shockwaves of dread through every human ship. "Contact," the Ironhold sensor officer shouted. "Multiple energy spikes across the wrecks." Rourke's blood turned cold. "They're waking up." From the graveyard rose shapes of metal and shadow, smaller than ships, larger than shuttles. Their forms shifted, as if liquid metal had hardened into blades. Rainsford's voice thundered. "Weapons free, target anything that moves." The void erupted in fire. The Ironhold unleashed its batteries, beams carving through alien shapes. The Vale spun desperately, launching missiles that detonated in blossoms of light. The husk's patched guns spat fury, their aim uneven but relentless. For every enemy torn apart, 2 more emerged from the wrecks. They moved with insect-like precision, swarming, testing. On the husk, Wren screamed over the comms. "They're not fighting to kill us. They're probing, measuring, like they're learning how we move." Rourke's jaw tightened. "Then let's teach them wrong." He ordered the husk into erratic maneuvers, feints and stutters that made no tactical sense. The alien shapes adapted, then faltered, their coordination briefly broken. "Again," Rourke barked, "make them think we're mad." The husk danced like a crippled beast, unpredictable and wild. The aliens hesitated, their swarms breaking rhythm. It bought the task force minutes, maybe seconds. But aboard the Vale, things went worse. One alien shape latched onto the frigate's hull, cutting through armor like cloth. Internal explosions ripped across her decks. Delacroix's voice came through the comm, choked with static. "We are breached, hull collapsing." The transmission ended in fire. The Vale was gone. On the Ironhold, Rainsford roared orders, but panic crackled in his voice. The cruiser's guns blasted wreck after wreck, yet more shadows swarmed. He cursed the day he had doubted, cursed the men who had whispered piracy. On the husk, Vey clutched her console. Her voice rose, trembling. It's not random. They're answering the signal. They're fragments, survivors. They're trying to hold on. Ren spat. Hold on by killing us? No, Vey whispered. By testing us. Deciding if we're threat or prey. Rourke's eyes hardened. Then we show them what threat means. The battle raged for hours that felt like days. The husk fought like a wounded animal, her crew burning through every trick Ren could devise. Alien shards fused to their hull, only to be torn off with desperate blasts. Marines manned guns with bare hands, screaming until their throats bled. The Ironhold bled too, her gleaming hull scarred, her shields shattered. Still she endured, Rainsford's voice a whip of iron. At last, as abruptly as it had begun, the swarm pulled back. The alien shapes drifted into the wrecks, retreating like shadows into the dark. The graveyard fell silent once more. The task force counted its dead. The Veil had been annihilated, hundreds gone. The Ironhold limped, crippled, the husk barely held together. Rourke stood on his bridge, staring at the silent wrecks. He knew silence was never safe. Then on every ship, a message appeared, not words, not symbols, but a single intent translated into human comprehension. The war never ended. The graveyard went dark. The words lingered across every display, etched in light that was not human. The war never ended. Silence followed, heavy and absolute. No crew spoke, no officer dared. It was as if the message itself had frozen them. On the bridge of the husk, Rourke finally broke it. Status? Ren's hands shook over his console. Reactors holding by prayer, weapons are slag. Hull integrity is, he cut himself off, then said, we are still breathing, barely. Vey's voice was hoarse. It wasn't a warning, it was a verdict. Rourke looked at her. Her eyes were wide, bloodshot, her face pale. He had suspected for weeks she carried a secret heavier than her uniform. He did not press her now. On the Ironhold, chaos reigned. Rainsford screamed orders over broken comms. Fires raged across decks, medbays overflowed, ammunition ran dry. Yet still the cruiser clung to life. The swarm had retreated, but it was not gone. Every sensor sweep showed movement in the wrecks, shapes circling, watching. The silence was not peace, it was preparation. The counselors back on Earth had wanted facts. Here they were, written in fire. Rourke knew if they died here, no one would ever believe what had happened. The message would be buried with them. He gathered his bridge crew. Listen, we don't win this, not in any way that counts, but we can survive it long enough to carry the truth home. That's the mission now, live long enough to warn them. The Marines stood stiff, jaws clenched. Ren grinned with blood in his teeth. Vey whispered, it's listening, it's still listening. Then let it, Rourke said. We'll show it what humanity does when it's cornered. The swarm came again. This time they did not probe, they attacked. Hundreds of shapes erupted from the graveyard, blades of living metal slicing through the dark. They came not as hunters, but as an army. The Ironhold met them head-on, guns blazing, tearing shadows apart in storms of light. The cruiser roared like a beast, defiant even as its hull split open. Rainsford stood on his command deck, face lit by fire, voice unbroken. We are the wall, hold. The husk darted through the chaos, smaller, faster, unpredictable. Rourke ordered feints and spins. Ren rerouted power in ways that defied physics. Alien blades sliced past them, missing by inches. The ship should have died a dozen times, yet each time human hands twisted fate just enough. Vey screamed suddenly. They're adapting. Every maneuver we use, they learn it, they mimic it. Rourke snarled. Then don't give them sense, give them madness. He ordered the ship into a spiral, engines cutting out mid-burn, weapons firing in random bursts. The husk fought like no machine should, its movements irrational, unpredictable. The swarm faltered, thrown off rhythm, trying to match insanity with logic. Ren laughed like a man possessed. That's it, break their pattern, break their minds. On the Ironhold, the wall crumbled. Hull breaches tore decks apart. Rainsford's officers begged him to retreat. He stood tall amid smoke and blood. No, he said calmly. If we run, the husk dies too, we hold for them. The cruiser turned broadside, unleashing its remaining batteries in a suicidal blaze. Alien shapes shattered under the storm. The swarm swarmed back, carving into her belly. Rainsford pressed a hand to his bleeding side and whispered into the comms, "Rurk, by us meaning." The iron hole detonated in a blinding flare, taking a dozen alien warforms with her. The blast shook the graveyard itself. Rurk bowed his head, one more ghost to carry. The husk was alone now. The swarm closed in, relentless. Hull plates peeled away, fires raged. Ren screamed over the comms, "Reactor S about to blow." "Then make it a weapon," Rurk said. Ren's grin returned, savage. "Now you're speaking my language." They rerouted the core, turning meltdown into fury. The husk's wounded heart became a bomb, its pulse radiating energy bursts that fried alien sensors, blinded their coordination. For a moment, the swarm staggered. In that moment, Vey acted. She tore open every channel, every frequency, and screamed the signal back at them. Not words, not language, but human rage and defiance poured into the void. The swarm hesitated. For the first time, they did not adapt. They recoiled. Rurk seized the moment. "All engines, burn everything we have." The husk shot free of the graveyard, trailing fire, leaving wreckage behind. Alien shapes followed, but slower, uncertain. They had not won. They had survived. When the stars calmed and the swarm receded, the husk drifted, her engines silent, her crew broken. Ren collapsed against the reactor, blood running down his chin. "Still here," he whispered. "Still goddamn here." Vey sat at her console, eyes wide. "It heard us. It knows us now." Rurk stood in the smoke-filled bridge, staring into the void. He thought of Rainsford's last words, "by us meaning." They had survived, yes, but survival was not enough. Humanity had touched the edge of something vast, a war older than their species, a hunger that had never ended. The truth weighed heavier than the dead. The final message came days later, when the husk's patched systems limped enough to send transmissions. Vey woke from a restless half-sleep, alarms flashing. On her console, the alien script flared again. Not hunger this time, not verdict, promise, "We are coming." The husk did not so much travel as crawl. Every hour was a battle of repairs, rerouted systems, and desperate ingenuity. Her engines sputtered like dying lungs, her hull creaked, her reactor groaned. She was less a ship than a coffin with momentum, but she was alive, and that mattered. Rurk stood on the bridge, surrounded by half-burned consoles and dangling cables. Only 3 stations were manned now, each occupied by someone who should have been in medical, but refused to leave their post. Ren sat with his chest bandaged, coughing into his sleeve every few minutes. Each cough left a new red stain, yet he worked, fingers flying as he tricked dying machines into obedience. Vey had not left her console in days. Her skin was ashen, her eyes ringed with purple. She stared into screens that sometimes showed data, sometimes only the echoes of the alien signal. She spoke little, except when she whispered, "It knows us." Rurk did not tell her to stop. He suspected she was right. The journey home took weeks. Time became a blur of patchwork survival. They stripped bulkheads for plating, jury-rigged weapons from mining charges, cannibalized dead systems to keep the reactor from collapsing. They ate rations that tasted of ash and drank water filtered through pipes scarred with smoke. They buried the dead as best they could. Wrapped in scorched sheets, bodies slid into the void one by one. Names were spoken, promises made. By the end, the crew could not remember how many they had committed to the stars. Each night, Rurk thought of the ironhold, of Rainsford's final calm order, "by us meaning." He wondered if they had, or if their struggle was nothing but another ripple lost in an endless war. When the husk limped into the frontier system of Caro's Reach, she was barely recognizable. Civilian transports fled at the sight of her scarred silhouette. Patrol ships drew weapons, unsure if she was human or something else. Only when the battered hull code pulsed through the void did they lower arms. Human, survivor, warning, they docked at the station. The crew stumbled off like ghosts. Medics recoiled at their gaunt faces and hollow eyes. Rurk walked last, his boots leaving blackened prints. News spread faster than fire. A single ship returned, carrying stories too terrible to believe. Politicians demanded explanations. Scientists demanded proof. Soldiers demanded weapons. Rourke gave them silence. The others gave them fragments, images of alien shapes, recordings of the graveyard, the final message: "We are coming." Still many dismissed it. Hysteria, they said, trauma, fabrication, but not all. A few listened, a few believed. And in dark rooms behind locked doors, plans began to form. Ren refused to leave the husk. Doctors begged, but he waved them off with bloodied hands. "Ship's not dead yet. Neither am I." He spent his days welding, patching, dreaming of ways to rebuild. Vey was taken under guard. The council wanted answers about the signal, about why she had heard what no one else had. She told them only that it was listening, that it knew them now. They did not understand, but they grew afraid. Rourke was summoned before panels and tribunals. Men and women in clean uniforms asked him if he had exaggerated, if he had broken protocol, if he had endangered human lives by provoking an unknown force. He told them the truth. "It does not matter what I did. The war never ended. It will reach us whether we want it or not. Prepare or we will burn." They dismissed him as bitter, but his words lingered like ash. Months passed. The husk remained in dry dock, a scarred relic of a battle no one could agree had truly happened. Some wanted her scrapped, fearing she carried corruption. Others wanted her studied. A handful whispered of repairing her, sending her back into the void. Her crew drifted, broken and scattered. Some never recovered. Some swore they would never leave human space again. But not Rourke. He stood often at the edge of the docks, staring at his ship. She was ugly, bent, ruined, yet she had survived when others had not. She had adapted, like humanity itself. One evening, Vey joined him. Her eyes were darker than before, her frame thinner, but her voice was steady. "It's not finished," she said. "No," Rourke agreed. "It never was." "They'll come," she whispered. "Not tomorrow, not next year. But they'll come, and when they do, they won't find us unready." Rourke looked at her. "You believe they'll listen now?" Vey smiled without joy. "They do not need to listen. Fear will do the work for us. They will build. They will prepare, even if they tell themselves it is for something else." He thought of Rainsford, of Strauss, of all the names lost to the void. He thought of the words burned into their screens. The war never ended. Then he looked at the husk, and for the first time since the graveyard, he felt something other than grief. Resolve. Humanity had been noticed. That was undeniable. The listening had become awareness. The warning had become promise. Somewhere beyond the maps, in the vast darkness, something stirred. A hunger older than empires, patient as the stars, but humanity was not patient. Humanity burned. Humanity adapted. When the war reached them, they would not go quietly, and perhaps, just perhaps, that would be enough. Time moved differently after survival. Every day stretched too long and ended too suddenly, as if the universe were impatient with humanity's hesitation. The husk sat in the orbital yards above Caro's reach, stripped to her bones, scaffolding wrapped around her like a cage. Workers swarmed over her plates, welding, replacing, cutting away. Some called her a wreck that should have been scrapped. Others whispered that she was cursed, a haunted relic carrying ghosts inside her steel, but still she remained. Broken, waiting, stubborn as the crew who had brought her home. Rourke leaned on the rail of the drydock observation deck. Below him, the ship stretched like a scar across the void, blackened hulls studded with patchwork. Lights flickered on her spine, welding torches like sparks of new life. He had stood there every day since their return. At first out of duty, then habit, now something closer to ritual. Watching the husk reminded him of what it meant to survive when you should not have. He had been called before 3 councils since the return. Each demanded reports, testimony, explanations. They wanted assurance more than truth. They wanted the nightmare contained inside his words, a thing they could put on a shelf and forget. He gave them nothing to ease their fears. The war never ended, he had told them again and again. It will come to us. Our choice is whether we are ready when it does. Some called him a zealot. Others said he was broken, unfit for command. The veterans who had fought beside him said nothing, because silence was the only answer left to them. Now he watched his ship rebuilt in shadows. And he wondered, not for the first time, if this was how wars always began, not with armies or declarations, but with the quiet denial of those who wanted to believe peace could last forever. Ren lived in the belly of the ship, same as before. He had been offered rest, retirement, even a desk in some laboratory on the core worlds. He refused them all. He said the husk needed him more than doctors did. They found him crouched in crawl spaces, sparks flying from his tools. He cut into alien plates salvaged from the graveyard, welding them beside human steel. He tested circuits until smoke poured from the walls. He coughed blood into rags, cursed his own lungs, then went back to work. When questioned, he said only, "She kept us alive. I owe her the same." But those who watched closely knew it was more. Ren was building something new. The husk was not just being repaired, she was becoming something else. Hybrid. A creature of two bloodlines welded together by stubborn human hands. The engineers above him argued, filed reports, tried to stop him, but they could not deny that his work held. Systems fused that should not have fused. Power ran through conduits that should have melted. The impossible became function under his tools. Ren laughed when they told him it was unsafe. "Unsafe is breathing in this galaxy," he said. "At least this way we are dangerous too." Vey did not walk free. From the moment she stepped off the husk, she was shadowed by security. Not chains, not cells, but rooms with no doors she could open. Interrogators asked her about the signal. Why had she heard it when others had not? Why had she been able to send something back? Why did the fragments of alien code respond to her in ways machines could not replicate? She told them what they wanted to hear. The signal was listening. It had noticed humanity. It would come. But she told them nothing of the nights when she lay awake and felt it pressing against her thoughts like cold fingers through glass. She told them nothing of the dreams that showed her vistas of dead worlds and burning skies. She told them nothing of the wordless impressions she could not explain, curiosity, hunger, recognition. She feared if she spoke them aloud, they would lock her away forever. So she played their game, and in quiet hours she studied the fragments they allowed her to see. And she began to piece together something new, not just warnings, not just threats, patterns, echoes of language older than their species. The signal was not simply watching, it was probing, searching for a way in. The Council on Earth fractured. Some argued that the husk's return was proof of a threat too great to ignore. They demanded militarization, new fleets, research into weapons that might stand against what had been glimpsed in the graveyard. Others dismissed it as hysteria. A single ship, half its crew dead, bringing stories no one could corroborate. Better to bury the fear than let it spread. Between them stood opportunists, those who saw profit in the panic. Contracts flowed for defense stations, for sensor networks, for experimental ships. Colonies demanded protection, core worlds demanded control, and lines began to draw themselves in the sand. Humanity had always fought itself as fiercely as any other enemy. Now the shadow of an alien war gave them a new excuse. Rourke watched it unfold with the same grim patience he had on the bridge. He knew it was inevitable. Humanity would not unite until the threat stood in their skies. Until then, there would be arguments, greed, suspicion. But he also knew something else. Humans adapted best when cornered, and nothing cornered a species faster than fear. The first new ships launched 6 months after the husk's return. They were not elegant, not beautiful. They were hasty children of necessity, bristling with weapons and wrapped in armor stolen from mining rigs. Ren called them ugly, but he smiled when he saw them burn fuel for the first time. "Ugly wins wars," he muttered. Colonies began drilling militias, teaching farmers and traders how to aim rifles in vacuum. Stations refitted their cargo bays into bunkers. Engineers scavenged old satellites and rewired them as beacons and decoys. Humanity was not fast, not organized, but it was relentless. Piece by piece, it turned fear into preparation. Still, the councils argued. Still, some denied. But fear was spreading faster than debate could contain it. Vey's work bore fruit at last. In the fragments of alien code, she uncovered something that was not warning but direction. A series of coordinates woven into the data like veins of ore through stone, not random, deliberate. She showed them to her guards. They passed it upward. Debates raged. Some said it was a trap, bait to lure humanity deeper into danger. Others said it was an opportunity, a chance to learn more, maybe to strike first. Vey said nothing, but in her heart she knew what it was, not bait, not invitation. Challenge. Rourke returned to the husk one evening, long after the workers had left. He walked her decks in silence, boots echoing on patched metal. He touched the walls where Strauss had once stood, where Rainsford had once spoken, where names now gone had left their mark. He found Wren asleep against a bulkhead, tools scattered around him, coughing even in his dreams. He found Vey in the brig's shadows, staring at nothing, lips moving to words only she could hear, and he thought, this is what survival looks like. Not clean, not proud, but stubborn, scarred, unyielding. He stood on the bridge at last, looking out at the stars. His ship was still broken, his crew still fractured, his people still blind. But they were not finished. The war had never ended. Now humanity's war had only just begun. A year to the day after the Husk's return, the signal came again. It spread through every channel, every frequency, every network humanity possessed. It bypassed encryption, ignored firewalls, poured into comms like water through stone. On every screen, in every station, in every ship, the same words appeared. We are coming. But this time there was more. A pulse of data, sharp and clear. A star chart marked with coordinates. A place. A time. The war had spoken. And for the first time, humanity spoke back. Not in whispers, not in denial, but in preparation. Engines roared. Weapons charged. Councils turned arguments into action. Colonies raised banners not of worlds but of species. Fear had done its work. Rourke stood once more at the bridge of the husk, now reforged, now something more than human steel. Wren coughed and laughed in the reactor bay. Vey whispered to the stars. The void waited, vast and silent. But silence was ending. The war never ended. And now humanity was ready to write itself into its pages.